Brutal Wars. Rome versus the Germanic tribe. Chapter 1: The Gathering Storm. The year was 9 AD, and the winds of conflict were blowing hard across the borders of the Roman Empire. The mighty legions, famed for their discipline, strength, and unwavering loyalty to Rome, had been spread thin over the vast expanse of the empire. From the deserts of Egypt to the hills of Britannia, Rome was a dominant force, a civilization that sought to bend the world to its will. Yet, in the forests and plains beyond the Rhine, trouble was brewing. The Germanic tribes, a loose confederation of fierce and proud peoples, had long resisted the advances of the Romans. They were wild, untamed, and they spoke of a freedom that no imperial eagle could ever claim. And at the center of this growing defiance was Arminius, a young chieftain who would come to symbolize the fierce resistance of the Germanic tribes. Arminius had once been a trusted ally of Rome. As a child, he had been taken as a hostage by the Romans and raised in the heart of their empire. There, he was trained as a soldier, learning the ways of the Roman army, mastering the use of the gladius, the Roman sword, and the tactics that had made the legions nearly unstoppable. He was a Roman citizen in all but name. Yet, his loyalty to Rome was betrayed when he realized that the empire was a ruthless machine, expanding at the expense of his people. When Arminius returned to his homeland, he did not bring the legions with him. Instead, he returned with a burning desire for revenge. He would lead his people against the very empire that had once shaped him, using his knowledge of Roman tactics to strike where it hurt the most. Chapter 2: The Battle of the Teutoburg Forest. In the year 9 AD, the Roman general Publius Quinctilius Varus was marching through the forests of Germania with 3 legions, the 17th, 18th, and 19th, a total of about 20,000 soldiers. The mission seemed simple enough: to subdue the Germanic tribes and secure the region for the empire. However, unbeknownst to Varus, a treacherous plot was unfolding. Arminius, who had gained Varus's trust, had informed him of a rebellion brewing in the region. Leading Varus to believe that the tribes were divided and disorganized, Arminius suggested that a swift march through the Teutoburg forest would bring an end to any resistance. But this was a trap, one that would change the course of history. As Varus's legions marched deeper into the forest, they were ambushed by a coalition of Germanic tribes, led by Arminius himself. The thick forest obscured their vision, and the Romans, unfamiliar with the terrain, found themselves surrounded on all sides. The Germanic warriors, armed with their long swords and spears, struck swiftly and ferociously, ambushing the Romans with a relentless fury. The battle that ensued was brutal. The Romans, caught off guard and unprepared for such a savage fight, were slaughtered by the thousands. Arminius, using his intimate knowledge of Roman tactics, commanded the tribes in a way that outsmarted and outmaneuvered the legions. The once proud Roman army was torn apart, and General Varus, realizing the magnitude of his failure, fell on his sword, choosing death over the disgrace of capture. When the battle was over, the once proud Roman legions were no more, and Arminius emerged as the undisputed hero of the Germanic tribes. The defeat at Teutoburg Forest sent shockwaves throughout Rome. For the first time in centuries, the Roman Empire had suffered a humiliating defeat, and the Germanic tribes had shown that they were more than capable of resisting the might of Rome. Chapter 3: The Aftermath of Defeat. News of the crushing defeat at Teutoburg spread like wildfire across the empire. Rome, which had once seemed invincible, now found itself on the defensive. The loss of 3 legions was not just a military setback. It was a blow to Roman pride, and the Emperor Augustus was enraged. He summoned his trusted generals and ordered them to prepare for retaliation. In Germania, Arminius and his people celebrated their victory. The tribes, who had long fought among themselves, now united under his leadership. They had tasted victory, and they believed that, with Arminius at the helm, they could drive the Romans from their lands once and for all. However, the tribal unity would not last forever. The very strength that had enabled them to defeat the Romans also made them fragile, as rivalries and old grudges began to resurface. Back in Rome, Emperor Augustus, though shaken by the loss, was not one to show weakness. He appointed new commanders to lead the Roman legions and ordered a massive campaign to reclaim the lost territory. Among these commanders was Germanicus, the adopted son of Tiberius, who was determined to avenge the defeat at Teutoburg. Chapter 4. The Roman Response. Germanicus was a brilliant military strategist, known for his courage and tactical acumen. When he was appointed to lead the Roman forces in Germania, he vowed to restore Roman honor and avenge the legions lost in the Teutoburg forest. His first campaign in 14 AD saw him push deep into Germanic territory, determined to crush Arminius's growing power. Germanicus's forces were formidable, but they faced a daunting challenge. The Germanic tribes, though fierce, were not united under a single banner. Arminius's leadership had proven crucial, but the tribal divisions began to weaken as the Romans advanced. Germanicus used his knowledge of Roman strategy to conduct raids, destroying Germanic villages and cutting off the tribes from any reinforcements. The battle that followed was fierce. Germanicus's legions clashed with Arminius's forces in a series of brutal engagements. Arminius, though a skilled commander, found himself unable to hold back the might of the Roman legions. Yet, despite the tactical victories, the Germans remained resilient, refusing to surrender or submit. Chapter 5. The Collapse of Roman Ambitions. Although Germanicus's campaign was marked by several successes, it ultimately failed to break the spirit of the Germanic tribes. Arminius, though wounded, remained defiant, and the Germanic tribes rallied around him. The Romans, though they inflicted heavy losses on their enemies, found themselves bogged down in a war that seemed to have no end. The dense forests of Germania proved to be a strategic nightmare for the legions, and Roman supply lines were increasingly stretched thin. Germanicus, despite his early victories, was eventually recalled to Rome. The Emperor Augustus had grown frustrated with the prolonged conflict, and the high cost of war weighed heavily on the Roman Senate. The dream of expanding the Roman Empire into Germania slowly faded, and the Rhine River was to become the official boundary of the empire. In 16 AD, after years of brutal conflict, the Romans withdrew from Germania, and Arminius's victory was complete. The Germanic tribes, once fragmented and disorganized, had fought off the might of Rome. Arminius became a legend, not just for his military brilliance, but for his ability to unite the disparate tribes against a common enemy. Chapter 6. The Legacy of War. The brutal wars between Rome and the Germanic tribes left a deep mark on both sides. In Rome, the defeat at Teutoburg Forest was a sobering reminder of the fragility of imperial power. The Romans would never again attempt to conquer the lands beyond the Rhine, and their expansionist ambitions were checked for good. Augustus, though able to maintain his power, would never fully recover from the psychological impact. Chapter 6. The Legacy of War. The brutal wars between Rome and the Germanic tribes left a deep mark on both sides. In Rome, the defeat at Teutoburg Forest was a sobering reminder of the fragility of imperial power. The Romans would never again attempt to conquer the lands beyond the Rhine, and their expansionist ambitions were checked for good. Augustus, though able to maintain his power, would never fully recover from the psychological impact of the loss. For the Germanic tribes, Arminius's victory represented the triumph of freedom and resistance against an overwhelming foe. However, the unity that had been forged in battle would not last. Rivalries between the tribes resurfaced, and the legacy of Arminius, though celebrated for a time, would eventually fade. The Germanic tribes, though free from Roman rule, would continue to live in a world of conflict, with new challenges on the horizon. Arminius, despite his legendary status, would meet a tragic end. After years of fighting and struggling to maintain his leadership, he was betrayed by his own people and assassinated by rivals within his own tribe. His death marked the end of the era of Germanic unity against Rome, but his legacy would live on in the history books, remembered as the man who defied the most powerful empire the world had ever known. And so, the brutal wars between Rome and the Germanic tribes came to an end. The rivers of blood shed in the forests of Germania faded into history, but the echoes of those battles would continue to reverberate through the centuries, reminding the world of the fierce resistance of the Germanic people and the enduring spirit of Arminius.